Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on the Coaches Parley, ASTV. With me, as always, playing on the right side tonight, Harry Mahesh, and my D partners, Mike Stackhouse, Sean Mullen, with the guest appearance earlier this week, talking a little trail smoke eaters action. It was great to catch up with his old roommates. Sean, thanks for keeping that PG. I really do appreciate that. I know we could have gone all zooish and leopardish and hell-bent on some crazy descriptions, but I'm glad we didn't.
No, I had a lot of fun reconnecting with Kevin. Great to see Kevin McCallum having the kind of success he has, from equipment manager and trainer to general manager. So there's lots of paths in hockey. And
there is lots of paths. Speaking of paths, the SJHL was on the path to providing a proposal to Saskatchewan Health, put it forth, and the proposal was rejected. It was given a hard no. I bring it to you, my defensemen, Mike and Sean. Give me some details as to why this proposal was not approved, or what were some of the implications as to the hiccups that were perceived by the province.
Well, everybody's new favorite word, variance. If you have even a couple cases of those, that's extremely problematic to do anything in society. The health people want you to believe that there's people dying in the street with variants. So if there's variants, they're not going to let a whole lot go ahead. My understanding on this is that there was about 6 or 7 SJHL teams, I think 7 actually, that wanted to participate. 5 teams had opted out, but 7 wanted to go ahead. The indications were that eventually health likely, it gets kind of gray area or muddy, if you will, but the 7 teams had their players isolating for the last 20 days because the intent is that if they get the go ahead, boom, they go right into the bubble and they start playing. So you've got 7 teams of healthy teenagers and 20-year-olds sitting in their rooms for the last 20 days anticipating to play, and they weren't allowed to play. The variants were one reason, which is tough to figure out because the bubble was supposed to be in Weyburn, not Regina. The government has brought the hammer down in Regina, but they haven't brought the hammer down yet, although I suspect that they're going to in the next couple of days to the rest of the province. But they said that there was too many variants in Regina for them to allow a bubble in Weyburn. There was also, I had talked to a couple people. They had said that there was some logistics with the hotels. There was going to be 2 hotels used. One would be completely full of SJHL participants. The second hotel was only going to be half full, and the hotel was going to be open to the public for the other half of their rooms, and that was a non-starter for the government or health or whoever it is that runs the province. And so I think that was something that for whatever reason they couldn't get around. I don't know why they didn't just say, look, close the other half of the hotel, and I don't really know. So, but that's the long and the short of it, was that they had been working on a plan. If they've been isolating for 20 days, that tells me that the decision probably was between 10 and 7 to 10 days late as it was. And I know I had talked to some SJHL coaches, and they had felt, well, we're supposed to find out today. And then the next day, well, I think we're finding out today. And then it would go another day. Well, we're supposed to find out today. And they got to the point where I think last Friday, a couple coaches had said to me, well, we still haven't heard, so we're just probably going to have to cancel. And then I think it was the Monday after that Friday that they were told, no, you're not going to be allowed to play. I think business wise for these teams, it's probably best that they don't. Player wise, we haven't cared about young people for the last year. Why would we start today?
What happens now? I mean, Mike, Harry, you guys would know better than I would, certainly, because you're directly involved with those 2 leagues, the MJHL and the SJHL. Is there any thought process that some of the more veteran players, at least, are going to get an opportunity to go to the leagues that will play, or are rosters shut down? Like what could happen for some of those guys if there was interest in Alberta and BC.
A lot of those deadlines have passed to add players. So, for example, in Winkler, all the 20s, I would say pretty much, I think 5 of the 6 went on to go either BC or out east. And there is a lot of players that just either finished up playing down south. I think the USPHL just had their national championship. There was a player from Winkler down there who played, and there was a deadline. Like, there's no adding to teams now that have been playing. Plus, they have their own bubble situation now too. So now that they're up and going, they don't really want to bring in new players. So the SJ kind of being the last one to make the decision, those players kind of lost out on that opportunity to go elsewhere.
Some of them did move along, prematurely, and my understanding is that the teams, none of the teams blocked anybody from finding places to play in the event that they could find places to play. I know in Yorkton's case, when the bubble was first proposed amongst the teams, Yorkton had said, you know what, cost-wise, we're probably not interested, but let's take it to the players. So they took it to the players, realized that they only had 12 that even wanted to play. And by the time the smoke cleared, with regards to teams committing to the bubble, my understanding is that goalie Philip Bond and forward Carson Miller were the only 2 players on Yorkton that wanted to go forward. And there was an agreement that Bond would play for Flin Flon and Miller was going to play for Humboldt in the event that they could go ahead. So the teams that weren't participating certainly weren't blocking anybody. The intent was that, hey, if you guys want to play, we'll try and make it happen. But when it came back that, Yorkton only had a dozen guys and there was a bit of a financial commitment, Yorkton decided, why would we, spend, any amount of money, I guess, and try and fill out a roster with some guys that, haven't been part of our organization, aren't going to be a future part of our organization. And ultimately, we just don't have enough of our own guys that want to play. And I could be wrong. But I think moving forward, we're going to see some more of this. Like there's guys that are bitter and they're really upset and they're mad, they're sad, they're depressed, and they've lost interest. And unless you're a guy that really has an opportunity to play beyond junior A, there's going to be guys that just don't want to do it. And I think, again, as a dad of teenagers, if I had a boy who was capable of playing high-level hockey, there is absolutely no way he's playing in this country. No way would I let him play here. And I don't care at this point if everything was green light, go. I don't trust it. And I'm willing to bet I'm not the only one.
No, it seems like, from my perspective, seeing continued leagues have proposals rejected, the beginnings of the Western Hockey League in these last couple of weeks, it seems that the onus has, as much as it's been seen, has not been put on the teams right now, but it's been put on the players, because if they're chosen or told that they are allowed to play, they hold all of the cards. They play well, they do well, the teams do well, they provide that success. But they're also auditioning for the fans of now and the fans of tomorrow. They're auditioning for potential sponsorships, potential businesses to get back into this ring and saying, we want to support these teams. So it's really an added stress on top of the mental stress that they've been facing over the last year. And is it really fair to these players to say that all of this matters and depends on how you're doing? But then again, we are not even giving you a chance to prepare for this. As much as they're young teenagers, are they really fully at a capacity where they can prepare and deliver their best foot forward in any circumstance? I mean, we see it we see glimpses of it. But what are these players really sacrificing over these next 2 or 3 months if they are playing?
I don't know. I can tell you this. I talked to a parent this week of an elite athlete, and that elite athlete has not even been in their own home for a couple of months. They're out of province at a rehab facility because they're wrecked.
Okay.
They're wrecked.
Sean, have you heard any other rumblings in terms of why the proposal was rejected, or is Mike pretty much on point with you know, how the city of Weyburn was the potential bubble, but it just didn't, you know, material pan out?
I think my impression, just from conversations I've had, and Mike would be way more connected to this than I would. I mean, he's directly connected to the SJ. The conversations I had were that, as he mentioned, the hotel issue was a major one, and just ultimately the money involved in their version of the hub versus the money involved in the Western League's version, the amount of steps you could take to ensure the separation and ensure the safety and all that kind of stuff, the SJ just wouldn't have had the same access to funds. Which, and actually the other thing that was said to me is they thought if this decision had been made closer to when the Western League's decision was made, then it would have been a different decision. And I wonder how fair that is too. The Western League was able to jump back into play, and the SJ had to wait another month before even getting an answer. And if they'd had their answer at that time, it might have been a different story because the COVID situation was different. I do think some people are going to be asking the question, and the Western Hockey League is a privately run organization, and I'm not calling them to carpet for this, but some people are going to be asking, how are they making this happen then? If money is a factor, if what they're able to provide. And I know some owners in the Western Hockey League are pretty well off families or businesses, but they're not in the habit of tossing aside millions of dollars without a return. Typically, they don't get in a position like that when you do. So I still don't quite know where all the money's coming from to make it possible. Yeah. And we haven't heard, outside of the actual funding that the teams each got from the government, if there was any kick-in from them. So I think a lot of people are probably wondering, well, where does the money come from to make it possible for them, but not possible for the SJ? I don't know the answer. If it's just from the team owners, it is what it is, but I don't know the answer.
I'd be very curious to know where the money's coming from. The National Football League, which is the one league that everybody kind of agrees doesn't need a single fan in the stands in order to turn a profit. I believe their salary cap for next year is going down by 20 million. So if the NFL salary cap is going down by 20 million, how much money is the National Hockey League losing? And then how much money is the Western Hockey League losing? And
just as you said, that's a league driven by gate entirely. There's a little bit of money for sponsorship. I'm not going to take away, but they can't access that really because there's no fans in the building. That's what you sell your sponsorship on. So merchandise a little bit. They're basically giving the broadcasts away. It's, I think, $40 for the whole package or something. So there's no way that's generating a huge amount of revenue. So are the team owners really willing to commit millions and millions of dollars to make sure this season happened without any return? Maybe they are, in which case, hands off, I'm really glad, but it just feels like there's something missing in this conversation about.
And you're right, Sean. I mean, these are business owners for a reason. They're not here to lose money. And the main issue I have with it is how tight-lipped it is now. And it's supposed to benefit the player. I mean, we're supposed to see the players benefiting the most. I want Harry to get his last word on this. As much as we don't know about the financial stability of this bubble in the East, especially, where, does it? I mean, we're going to see numbers come out after this bubble is finished to seeing how much a team loses, but then how much support are they going to get from anywhere? And I don't think they're going to get anything. And like I said earlier, the onus is on the players. Do you feel that the players rightfully control how this will play out for the fall?
Yeah, I mean, I talk with this new job here. I've been talking to a lot of guys. The guys I'm talking to, they're still all fully committed. There's a lot of interest in it. I was, worried if numbers would drop off, but in my experience, everybody's still, game on, game as usual. I think society in general will want things to get back to normal, the sponsorships and everything like that. I think people will feel more of a sense of normal if they get back to that routine. Yeah, it's going to hurt the pocketbook a little bit again, but the only way we get back to normal is if we resume those normal activities and people start to sponsor hockey and hockey gets going. If, everybody, closes their wallets and, defends them, or, protects themselves, it's going to be hard. So it's going to take a little bit more sacrifice. And obviously from our end of the deal, like, we honor those sponsorships and advertising and, promote businesses. So it does work hand in hand, but somebody's going to have to kind of take a step back in order for things to get back to normal.
We'll leave it at that. Unless Mike, go ahead. Last thought, go ahead.
Yeah, just very quickly. What I've realized here in the last few days, especially, is just how few people are involved in elite level sports, how few people are involved in tourism, how few people are involved in mass gatherings, and how many people receive a government paycheck of some kind or work in the civil service. In Manitoba, over 1 million people, and almost 25% of Manitobans work in the civil service. I mean, that's a big number. And for those people that haven't been affected by these measures, it's a big number. And there's no motivation for them to restore normality.
No. We'll leave it at that. We'll come back in a second. We're going to talk about another league that's making a different type of rumbling, not considering a no stance, but looking to branch out perhaps on the West Coast. Stay here on the Coaches Parlay. Back here on the Coaches Parlay with the usual crew. We talked a little about the SJ, how it was a big no. Huge hit for not only the city of Weyburn, but the 20-year-olds that waited and waited and waited, hoping for a little bit of play, just didn't see it happening in Saskatchewan. Nonetheless, we're going to move a little bit further west here, boys. We're going to talk about some early storylines involving the BCHL. Not all the news is out on this, but they're looking to move away from CJHL. And I don't know why. I mean, I'm going to let Harry start this one off because it was Rod Peterson brought it up this morning, or earlier this week, I should say, in regards to them branching out and looking for disassociation from Canadian junior hockey. Harry, what would you think is being the main reason as to why they're doing this?
I don't know, to be honest. If it's just a reaction from this past season and maybe some of the stuff they have to go through with the COVID and having to the restrictions, hopefully this was just a one-time thing and things can get back to normal. But I don't know. Like, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know if BC has their own kind of proposals in terms of rules. I've heard anything from mandating the full face shields to, I mean, that's kind of it. I'm being completely honest with you. When I heard the news, I was shocked. More so that the fact that Alberta would just be okay with letting 4 teams go. I don't think that's going to be an easy transition. I'm sure there's got to be some kind of hurdles to go through there. But I'll be honest, I don't know what the benefit would be. I don't know, what they can do in terms of different exposure for players, or how that would help them financially. Like, the league. The CJHL provides sponsors as well, so they would lose out on that. I don't think that hinders BCHL teams from, their own sponsors. So I don't know. I don't, to say, well, that's a good thing. Well, it's the same teams playing each other, so that's a big benefit, really.
I have thoughts. I think even dating back to the time that I was covering that league, I got the impression that they fancied themselves at another level to the other junior A leagues in Canada. and they had ambitions to be more comparable to the United States Hockey League, and found that the USHL was in fact maybe their primary competition. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I don't know if you guys are hearing my daughter in the background on the exercise. Somebody's using the elliptical.
You're doing push-ups, Sean. You're on day 19, I think, aren't you?
Yeah. Almost done my 25 push-ups every day. But so when I was in the league as a broadcaster back in 2007, 2010, they were having issues battling the USHL for players. The USHL has become even a bigger draw since that time. I think BC fancies themselves, the upper echelon of the junior A leagues in Canada, based on the arenas, the markets, the players, the coaches, blah blah blah. That's their impression of themselves, and I think maybe the thought process is being tied to the broader umbrella of the CJHL limits them in their ability to be more aggressive. And I don't know how that would affect player recruiting, as an example. Right now, under that umbrella, you can't touch a player from another Western province until they're, graduated midget hockey. Are they hoping to get into a situation where they can start scooping some of those younger players from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, like the USHL tries to do? I don't know. Are they, are they trying to change their rule structures in such a way that would differentiate them and draw those players from across the country? I think the idea here is to distinguish themselves from the other junior A leagues in Canada and say, we're the next step. It's junior A, BCHL, USHL, major junior, and separate themselves, put them in that category. I don't know all the steps they would take to do it, but I am not surprised even from 10, 11 years ago. You should hear, and I don't mean this, I don't necessarily think these things, although I had very little exposure to junior A hockey in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. But when you're in that BCHL bubble, they definitively think of themselves as a whole next step up from all those other leagues. That's the mentality. And that was the mentality 10, 11 years ago. I'm sure it still is.
Does this kind of separate them, Mike, from like what Sean said? I mean, the USHL is getting a lot more prominent look now, especially because Western hockey, all hockey has been gone for almost 9 months here in these provinces. But do you feel that this is a way that, BC and those 4 teams you mentioned from Alberta can establish themselves as, the upper A versus the lower A umbrella that Sean's talking about?
What if they have plans to form some sort of an alliance with the USHL? What if they're, I mean, we talk about the CFL and the XFL, but what if their longer range plan here to further cement themselves as being that upper tier is, if you can't beat them, join them, because they're losing players to the USHL. So now if we leave the Canadian Junior Hockey League, we're a level above that. The USHL could possibly recognize that. You could have trades moving back and forth between the two leagues. I don't know. I'm entirely speculating. But I think for me, the biggest concern, if I'm running a junior A team in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta with the teams that aren't affected, there's nothing stopping them from raping and pillaging your roster. Nothing whatsoever. And I remember, I'll go back, I'll try and make this short. It's kind of a funny story, as tragic as it is. But years ago, a player by the name of Brent Dodging Horse played for the Vernon Vipers and helped them win the National Junior A Championship. The LeBret Eagles were a team in the SJHL at the time, and it was imperative, they felt, that they have a First Nations player represent their team because they were on a First Nations reserve, and they really felt that they could market their team around not only the best First Nations player in the country, but maybe the best player entirely in the country. Dodging Horse was an exceptional player. And so they had arranged a trade with Vernon. They paid $15,000 to the Vipers to get Dodging Horse in their lineup. He came to the community. They had a major social event. They had a nice star blanket for him. They had his own personalized golf bag. There was a barbecue set up. The entire, population of the community was there. It was a major, major event. And the next morning he went to Lincoln. And that's my biggest fear. If I'm running a Manitoba team or a Saskatchewan team, is that you do all this recruiting and you think you got your guy, and then all of a sudden Penticton flies in and says, hey, you know what, why don't you come here and play for Penticton? Well, the way that it's set up right now, at least Harry's got a fighting chance to keep his guy. Ultimately, if the player says, I'm not going to report, Harry's going to make a trade. He's going to cut his losses. He's at least going to get another asset or some money for a player who doesn't want to play for him. In this case, he's going to get nothing. He's going to recruit to the best of his ability, think that he's maybe got a pretty decent team, and find, or worse, what happens if you recruit a guy, let's say he's, Joe Smith, and Joe Smith has got 10 points in 4 games to start the year, and Brooks, hey, why don't you come play for us? Okay. I mean, there's a lot of ramifications that could happen here as far as the player end of it goes. I don't know the motivation. I mean, there's going to be some things they got to work out with regards to insurance and that. And Harry would know this better than the rest of us, but it's not easy sometimes. Like I remember there was a kid from Melville a couple of years ago, and he had a past history of dental problems, and he had to wear a full cage because no one in Saskatchewan would operate on him in the event of an injury, and he couldn't get insurance. So there's going to be some of that stuff that they're going to have to work around. But I would acknowledge BC is the best junior A league in the country, I think, at least as far as the elite teams. Like, when they're top 4 or 5 teams, for sure. I mean, they're really good. When you start getting down into the middle of the road teams and the teams that aren't so good, there's nothing special about them at all. But certainly, like, years ago when Vernon, Penticton, Chilliwack, or when they're ruling the roost, yeah, they're really good programs and probably are the best programs in the country. But you know what? They should be. And don't take offense to this, but if you're a teenager and you've grown up in rural Saskatchewan or rural Manitoba, do you want to go live in the Okanagan or Kelowna, or do you want to go live in La Ronge or Melville or Steinbach? And I'm not slighting those communities. But if you've ever been out to BC and visited some of those cities, why wouldn't you want to go?
I wonder if there is small market teams in the BCHL. If there is any kind of idea of a merger or a partnership with the USHL team, as far as I'm concerned, the WHL, I don't know if they even have player fees. I don't know if they're what players pay, if anything. In BC, I think some teams maybe do charge for billets, but if you're going to join in any other league, you're going to have a mandated set of rules and player fees. Can a smaller market like a Merit,
right,
can they run on a budget where players don't pay anything? BC, they should be scared of maybe losing some of their own teams by getting too big. They want to absorb the top 4 teams from Alberta maybe, but I mean, there's teams there that struggle year to year. And so, you want to turn it to superpower, but does that mean you cut off your weaklings to get bigger? Who knows?
But who's driving?
I don't think they care. I think that the power hitters in that league don't care. So if Merritt or Prince George, and Prince George isn't a small market, but because of their location, sometimes they've, haven't had a lot of success. I don't think they care. I think that league is run by, some of the communities and the private owners that I mentioned, and they're going to do what they want. And if some of them are lopped off, doesn't matter. And in fact, I think they're expecting it. That's why they've got Brooks and Okotoks and Grand Prairie in their back pocket.
I think they would be pleased to some degree, because I think there's some of these teams at the upper echelon of the BCHL that, again, as we talked about, sort of see themselves competing with the Western League, see themselves competing with the USHL. They have big staffs, they have nice facilities, and then they go to some of these other places. And I remember, and I won't name names here, but when I was in Trail, and Trail was community run at the time, now they're privately owned. And they're a massive success story, thanks to the work of everybody involved in making that happen there. But at the time, it was community-run, shoestring budget. there was an issue with the phone line for the broadcast, and some folks from one of the upper echelon teams were making a big stink and pretty dismissive about the operation in Trail. I've heard those same kind of comments about Merritt. I've heard those same kind of comments about Quesnel, and they're gone now. So I think there's those in those positions that would love to call some of those teams they don't think meet the standards that they're trying to approach. And this would be one way of heading in that direction. And you talk about the player factor. Those elite teams are not afraid to commit to 30 guys. They do. They do it every year. And then all of a sudden, one of those guys who was committed to, oh, you're going to be on my second line, ends up traded to Merritt. Or at least when there's the CJHL, you can turn around and deal them to a team in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba where they can get top line minutes. If you make that move, what's going to happen? Are they going to cut you, or are you just going to get traded somewhere else in that league? Or, you know, you've taken yourselves out of the mix in one place and thrown yourself on, you know, towards these teams. But you're right. Like the ultimate, the people that are going to be punished by this the most are the leagues in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and whatever's left of Alberta, because if you're an elite junior A level player and there's no age restriction, so you can, you know, start as early as you want. I don't know how that would work. Why would you play anywhere but the highest level you can play that still gives you college eligibility? If you can go to the BCHL and there's a higher level of talent there and they have a spot for you, why would you choose not to in that scenario? If they're, you know, taking the step up, so to speak. So I think there'd be a lot of resistance elsewhere in the country to that move, but what could they do to stop it? I'm not sure. And I'd be really curious, like you said, how much smaller would the BCHL be when they take that step?
If they were to set up a speculative West Coast division of the USHL, they could quickly adopt the transfers, the age restrictions, the ability to have a Canadian division amongst a USHL base that is now proven to not only be able to play under these conditions, but also give those players, like you said, that almost level of a Western Hockey League perspective. Still have all the merits of junior hockey, the culture and whatnot we've discussed time and time on this show. I know, Mike, you want to rhyme in there. Go ahead and speak.
I get criticized and crucified for this every time I bring it up, and Harry's going to probably rip me a new one for even suggesting this. But if I was running a junior A team in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, especially in Saskatchewan, if I was running a junior A team in Saskatchewan, I would cozy up to the Western Hockey League, and I would unofficially affiliate with one or two teams in the Western Hockey League, and I would have agreements there, and I would pay no attention whatsoever to the NCAA. They don't do anything for me as a team. There's that carrot when you're recruiting players. Hey, you could get a scholarship. But you know what? Have you actually ever tried? You know what? We work really closely with the Saskatoon Blades. And if you come play for us as a 17-year-old, you're not quite ready to play for the Saskatoon Blades. If you're ready to go there at 18, good luck. Congratulations. I got nothing but good things to say about it. And away you go. And I think that if I was running a junior A team, I would pivot and I would promote Western Hockey League. And you know what? If you lose guys to Western Hockey League, great. You're doing your job.
Sean, before you hum in here, because they're looking to dissociate from the CJHL, does Hockey Canada have to approve this disassociation, or can they just do it carte blanche? I mean, is there a agreement with Hockey Canada and its insurance policies or its mandates to even allow something like this?
Well, you've heard of outlaw leagues, right? So Hockey Canada would oppose that kind of a scenario greatly. I don't know the inner workings of this conversation. I assume the BCHL is not just going to, one day show up at the offices in Calgary and say, "We're out, boys." They would try to negotiate some kind of mutually beneficial agreement, because trying to just go up against Hockey Canada is a losing battle. Yep. Being an outlaw league in Canada would be messy. But at the same time, Hockey Canada doesn't want the BCHL to disappear either. So God knows how that would come about.
Well, and here's the thing from Hockey Canada's perspective, when they're running their national junior programs and things like that, I mean, are you blackballing Cale Makar and Tyson Jost?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, don't just think the Western League's going to sit back and be okay with this, because the USHL draft would now incorporate the BC teams. So we think that draft age is going to go up. Well, it's not moving if those USHL teams can all of a sudden dip into that Canadian pool. So I'm sure the Western League will also have a retaliation for, you want to, take a province from us? Well, they'll do something, whether it's,
yeah,
I don't know exactly what it is, but they'll have something up their sleeve.
Yeah.
This is definitely an
they'll
early conversation that's happening. I mean, we're only a couple of days into it, so
I remember Penticton, as an example, has a larger coaching staff than most Western Hockey League teams. Like, they've got, if you look at their website, there's like 6 coaches in Penticton, and like stats and analytics guys for a junior A team. And then you have another team that's got a coach, GM, and an assistant coach. So you're not at a level playing field. The Western Hockey League has similar problems, but yeah, if you have a handful of teams like that, and then you're not preventing them from going to the NCAA at the same time, and you can say, our level of play is higher because we've got all the most of the best junior A talent in one province, so your pool of talent would be a lot more elite, and so the level of play would be higher. Yeah, the competition with the Western Hockey League would be massive, and it would just completely change the dynamic of junior hockey in Canada.
Yeah.
And everybody involved would have to ask themselves the question, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And how many people is it a good thing for? Because if it's just a good thing for a small, select few franchises, and it hurts a larger scope of the junior A picture in the country or junior hockey picture of the country, then you have to think very seriously about whether you fight that. So I'm not sure the answer. I'd have to see a lot more details, but it's a very interesting conversation.
Well, to me, like, ultimately, and this has always been my philosophy behind coaching now, is we talk about the leagues, the franchises. Does this affect the players in a positive way? Because ultimately, if whatever they're doing affects the players in a positive way, then good. If it's just for business, then whatever. But, if the players are going there and they're getting better and they are moving on, then how can you sit and argue with that? If there's, if they're advancing players and, they're developing the best players in the NHL and in college player, then they did something right. If teams are making a lot of money and, 2 or 3 kids move on and the other 18 kids just go to university and go to work, then who cares? So
this would be my question for Harry very quickly. So if Joe Smith plays 4 games for you and he's got 10 points and he goes to Penticton and he fizzles out after 12 games and they cut him, will you take him back?
Case by case.
Depends on the kid, probably, right?
I mean, 10 points in 4 games helps me, right? I mean, that's the thing is, honestly, I was just talking off before we started. Kids today, like, you got to give them a pass. Like, they have advisors, they have parents. I bet you 15% of the decision is made by somebody else nowadays. So how much can you hold over the kid? If the advisor says go, mom and dad say go, they're paying your cell phone bill, they're buying your ticket out there, you get cut, well, maybe you didn't want to leave in the first place. So I don't know. It's case by case. If the kid tells me to F off on his way out the door, then probably not. But if he comes back and he just says, this is what they told me to do, they're my parents, they're my advisor, and yeah, okay, come on back and keep that average.
Last word.
I think that's a great point earlier by Mike too about the SJ and MJ and what's left of Alberta if that happens, and even before that happens, being a lot more actively involved with the Western Hockey League. I don't know why that would be a bad thing, because the percentage of players in the prairie leagues that go on to get full ride scholarships is not very high. And so if you can turn them around into, signed Western Hockey League players with guaranteed education packages from that, and that's another avenue, not the only one. You're not neglecting the NCAA route. You're just saying, here's another avenue for us to develop talent and work with talent and actively do it. And instead of fighting and opposing, but work with the coaches, work with the managers, say, we want to connect with you and help develop your player. then that could be a real strength for some teams that are willing to take on those types of relationships. And the Western Hockey League has a lot of players at 16 or 17, even sometimes 18, that aren't quite there yet. And they would love to have them in an environment where they can trust they're going to be developed. I think there's some hesitancy sometimes with Junior A that they're going to go back and get buried because they're not their guys, or, you know, they're not going to stick around for the long term. So if they can develop some real positive working relationships with that league, that would change the dynamic all over again too. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this could go.
This move could be a game changer, positively and negatively, if it's to be allowed. And like you said, we've come up with some great opportunities, some ideas and speculations. We're going to leave it there in the middle frame, gentlemen. When we come back, we're going to talk about that bubble in Regina, how successful it's been here on Coach's Parley.
Welcome to Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy, your world-class academic and hockey training facility created to maximize each student's athletic and academic potential. Blackjack Stewart Arena, home of the Buffalo, is inside the 46,000 square foot complex, as well as a curling rink and other facilities. The students have a unique combination of successful, well-rounded education at Pilot Mountain Collegiate Institute and the professional hockey training in an encouraging community. The years of experience of on-ice coaching propel our students to the next level, both mentally and physically, in a professional environment.
Gentlemen, we're back in the final 20 minutes of our discussion. Harry Mahesh, Mike Stackhouse, Sean, I want to thank our sponsors very much for helping us out with tonight's show. We come to the bubble, probably the highlight of the night because we've had two downers. We got to have one upper. We got to end up on the high point here, boys. I mean, let's be honest. It's been fairly successful in Regina. Without talking about the finances and where the money's coming from, Mike, is Connor Bedard that special to be doing what he's doing? I mean, he's selling the game to the fans, selling the game to the opponents, and the coaches aren't really hiding the fact that they want this kid to play. If he could play 55 minutes a game, he would. Because they got him playing penalties, they got him playing power plays. If he could put on pads quickly, he'd probably play in net.
Well, so again, I think there's ulterior motives isn't the right phrase to use, but I think there's some ulterior motives here, because if it's at all sketchy about the season starting in September and you're Connor Bedard, where are you going? Not Regina. You're going to Europe or you're going somewhere else if you're at all nervous. So if you're the Pats, you're saying, look, you're going to play until you can't play anymore. You're going to have to beg us to take you off the ice. And what I'm seeing here, which is, to transition into the exciting part, is he's 15. He should not be playing in this league at all.
Right.
And he's got, a point and a half, almost 2 points a game here through the early going. And I look back and I looked at some of the stats. Like Gretzky was 16 when he was putting up numbers in Major Junior, not 15. Mario Lemieux, actually, his first year Major Junior, it was awesome, but not close to this. Vinny LeCavalier, Sidney Crosby, those are some of the other guys that, that I can think of off the top of my head that, just put pucks in the net at will at the Major Junior level. And yet all of them were 16 as well. So, like Eric Lindros, John Tavares, like some of the other guys had, exemption status or whatever you want to call it. And he's 15. I'm not going to, say that he's the greatest player I've ever seen, but I don't know that at Major Junior at 15, I don't know that we've seen this. And Sean is obviously, involved in the Major Junior level, but off the top of my head, I don't think we've ever seen this.
Well, we've definitely never seen it out west. We've always been tracking those guys in Ontario and Quebec. So I think the perception in the old days was the Western League was way too big and tough and 15-year-olds. But I mean, it's a different game. And I mean, I've watched some of his highlights and like he's good, and it's
he's so good.
It used to be where you'd be like, let's be cautious and see what happens. But there is those guys that come around every 5-6 years where, 15, you could say this kid's going to be he's probably going to be the first overall NHL pick.
This is the first one ever in the Western Hockey League. It's not even 5-6 years. I mean, can you think of, I can't, Sean, tell me if you could think of a Western Hockey League player at that young of an age that was so silky smooth, dominant into the attack zone. He almost plays a 190-foot game, this kid.
I think Jay Bouwmeester was the last kind of young prodigy that you followed from like 15. I don't know. He wasn't in the Western League at 15, but
No, he
16,
played in, yeah, he played for Brooks or something like that. I remember playing summer hockey and watching him play summer hockey. And he was 3-4 inches taller than anybody. And his hand-eye coordination was unreal. I mean, I was dazzled when I was 17 watching him play at 14. It was incredible what he was doing.
But I covered the Western League when he was in the Western League, and I remember watching him play at 16, and you could tell he was going to be special, but he didn't dominate. He belonged, but he didn't dominate.
Right.
So a couple of things that come to mind for me. First, I just quickly looked this up, and I kind of knew it in the back of my head. Connor McDavid, as a 15-year-old, and we all know what Connor McDavid is now, on a bad Erie team, had 25 goals, 41 assists in 63 games, 66 points, barely above a point a game. He was a -24 on that team. Regina's a bad hockey team. Connor Bedard has 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points in 7 games, and he's +2.
Yeah.
So what he's doing is unheard of at this point. A couple of points, though. I think the teams in the East Division bubble are not quite at the competitive level as a usual Western Hockey League team. And I'm not saying it's way off, but I think they're a little younger. It's early in the year. They're a little less structured than they would be. Normally, teams would have had a full training camp and then a month of preseason games to really work into their systems. I found the preseason and the first month of the season were the most wide open hockey you'd get all year. Then all of a sudden, the point totals would start to come down. So the fact that they're right into hockey does lend itself maybe to a little more room for someone like that to score. But that's only taking the slightest bit away from what he's been able to accomplish. It's been spectacular to watch from Connor Bedard. We're talking about a generational level talent that's in the WHL right now. And the biggest shame of it all, I mean, he's been the story of the hub. There's zero question about that. The biggest shame of it all is that there's nobody able to watch him in the stands. And, one of the rare seasons we'll get of him, because he'll be a three-year and gone guy.
If he stays in the dub, Mike thinks he's going to go overseas. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I would be surprised. Unless there's another mess next year. So I guess that a lot of that depends.
Yeah.
But, look at Braden Yeager. He is not considered to be that kind of player, but he's a 15-year-old. He's a high-skilled player playing for Moose Jaw. He's got 5 points in 7 games. So I do think, there's a lot of rookies. I'm just looking at the rookie scoring right now. Benson's a point a game. Geeky's just under. Lazowski's just under. Zandy's just under. Yeager. There's been more room out there for young guys, maybe than there would be in a typical season to some degree, but it doesn't take much away from what Bedard's done. And the only player I can think of in my time following the league that at such a young age made an impact that would have shocked you was Braden Point when he joined the Moose Jaw Warriors for the playoffs as a 15-year-old. And the guy didn't even go until midway through the first round. It was absolutely nuts that he got that far down the draft, because that was still an era where size was such a big deal in the draft. But Point joined Moose Jaw for a playoff run as a 15-year-old and had 7 goals in 14 games and was as good an offensive weapon as they had on that team that went to the conference final. But that's still not coming close to what Bedard's done. And look what Point became. He was the best player in the league at one point. He was a 100-point guy. He's a first liner in the NHL. But he still wasn't doing what Bedard's doing now. What he's capable of, who knows? But right now, he's as good a young player as maybe the Western Hockey League has ever seen.
Harry, what's your take on how the Ice are doing so far? I mean, they clearly are showing that they've got the right mix of young kids and veteranship, and They're taking advantage of this bubble, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's been good to see. I mean, I'll be totally honest. Since I've been back in Manitoba, I've kind of been just sitting in front of my computer working away, so I haven't been as tuned as I was before I got here. But no, I check in with them, and they played tonight. I don't actually know what the score was tonight, but yeah, they're doing good. And I'm familiar. There's a couple of guys that did play with the Freeze this past year up there. Well, one I guess, Brent Young, and so it's cool to track somebody who's associated with your team, and just for a first year program to have an alumni already in that ranks and doing well. It's fun.
Mike, is Prince Albert playing second fiddle to Winnipeg, or is there another team that we should be looking at in the next couple of weeks here?
Well, Saskatoon's still playing pretty good as well. But I think talent, if you're just sort of looking at talent, it's hard not to be looking at Winnipeg, right? I think to me, they're the class of the division, top to bottom with Krebs and some of these guys that are playing for them. So I think, you asked on the last show who we were all picking, and I think I picked Saskatoon, and it was half joking because I said, wouldn't it be fitting?
Dark horse call.
Well, or just, but wouldn't it be fitting for them to really do well? The city doesn't care about that team most of the time, and then all of a sudden they do well, and maybe they could generate some interest and no one can go watch. So, I kind of did it in jest, but Saskatoon has played pretty good. But I think Winnipeg's got to be the class, I think, the more that we go here. But, out in Alberta, Edmonton is still rolling over everybody.
Yeah. Have they lost? Is Edmonton lost yet? I don't think so.
Is that a test? I don't think they've lost in regulation. I think they're like 7-0-1.
Yeah, I think they lost one in overtime, but nonetheless, they are simply the class in the Alberta division. That's for sure.
Right now, they haven't lost anything. Now, as we tape, that may change later on. They've outscored teams 34-9 so far. So
it's disgusting.
The Oil Kings are right now looking at themselves like, did this have to be a COVID season? And I had to say, I don't know if I said this last time or if I said this on some other chats I've done about the league, but man, do I feel bad for Saskatoon. Years of being horrible and self-inflicted. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they, like Regina and Swift Current and Moose Jaw to a lesser degree a couple of years ago, threw everything they had at a couple seasons, especially the Memorial Cup. So yes, the struggles they had after that were self-inflicted, but to go through years and years and years and years of that after the Memorial Cup wasn't even successful, and then to finally have your team come together, and then Kirby Doc graduates early, and then last year is a COVID lost season, and then this year is a COVID lost playoff in all likelihood, and that's the reward you get for all those years of developing players. What a kick in the teeth for that organization, who's been kicked in the teeth so many times and never got that big ring yet. It's just got to hurt. Like, I really do feel for them.
Well, there we have it, gentlemen. Want to pick one 60-second thought before we say goodnight tonight, gentlemen? Start with you, Harry.
I get the full 60 seconds?
You get a 60-second spot before I cut Mike off for 60 seconds because I know he's probably
honestly, it's just for myself personally, it's nice to be kind of surrounded by hockey again. The MJ has given us the green light to skate with our players and our prospects. So for me, it really does feel like business as usual. I get to go to the rink 3 times a week. Tomorrow's my first day, or I guess yesterday, if this comes out Saturday, first day out of quarantine. So yeah, I get to be back on the ice and just doing what I love. So it's nice to talk about.
You don't have any tape on the blades of your skates. Sometimes I like to do that to a first-year head coach GM.
We're using the Winnipeg Ice practice facility setup, and it's beautiful. So I got my own setup there, so I don't interact with the players until I'm on the ice. So it's nice.
So you're safe.
Yeah.
No sabotage. Okay, Mike, 60 seconds is yours. Go.
I guess just to sort of piggyback on that BCHL scenario, I hope that if that goes ahead, that the other junior A leagues, hey, how's it going? do something to, spark some more interest or, get innovative in their game. I've long been an advocate of an interlocking schedule between Manitoba and Saskatchewan. I live in Yorkton, so Dawson's less than 2 hours away. Waiway-Sakapo's 75 minutes away. Swan River's less than 2 hours away. Neepawa, I think, is just over 2 hours away. Burden is about 2 hours away. So for Yorkton to play a handful of Manitoba teams, it'd be great. I know, like Dauphin in particular, would fill both rinks if they had some sort of a series. And I know you're going to cut me off, but I actually like the NCAA model where you actually have a number of out of conference or out of league games. And so maybe Flin Flon and OCN could have a series. Maybe Yorkton, Dauphin, Swan River, Wayway, and Melville could have like a tournament over Christmas or something like that. I'd like to see some of that innovation come into both leagues and generate some further interest.
66 seconds, not too bad, Mike. Sean?
But picking up on that part of the conversation, as much as you have to be very careful with any changes you make to the structure of junior hockey in the country and any changes you make to, the overall dynamic of the sport in our country. At the same time, sitting still, the status quo, if there's areas of it that aren't working and other places are making changes that are working, standing still can be death. So being creative and thinking outside the box, as cliched as that isn't a bad thing when there's some problems and some opportunities and some failings that they need to work through. So, maybe this plan isn't the plan, but it should open the door to have some conversations about, not being stuck in the ways that we've always done things just because we've always done things that way. And one thing that a pandemic like this and all the unfortunate realities that is thrown on the sports world can do is it gives us a lot of time to think about the possibilities. And a last thought, you just saw my daughter sitting in my lap, and Mike's talked a lot about the impact of this on kids. I've been lucky enough that my little girl in the last 6 weeks was able to get back on the ice and skate again after having her skating classes cut off for half the year, and has been able to get outside and play again and move her feet, move her legs. And, sometimes I sort of wasn't sure, is it really that bad? But now that I've seen, when things were the way they were, but now that I've seen her out and active and on the ice and in the parks, the difference in her from just the last month is night and day. So like Mike said, I feel for everybody who has had that taken away, and God, I hope that we can get as much of it back as possible soon.
Mike, Sean, you summed it up perfectly. I have nothing left to say. You did a marvelous job. Thank you, gentlemen. Harry, you look like you have to say one more thing.
What's that?
You have one more thing to say, or you all done?
Oh, I'm good.
You're good. You just want to get on the ice. You just want to get back on there and see if you know how to skate. I totally agree.
That's what I do best. I'm tired of talking.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Again, join us every second Saturday on Coach's Parley here on ASTV. For Mike, Sean, and Harry, have a great evening. Take care of yourselves. Get some activity. If there's snow left to shovel, go shovel it. There you have it. Have a great evening. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye for now.